God says, "My child, I really need you. Open this now. Do not let it wait until later, because later has a way of never actually arriving. Stop what you are doing. Sit with this for a moment before you keep scrolling. You have spent so much of your life asking what you need from me. Today is different. Today, I am telling you plainly. I need you. Not in the way that suggests I am somehow incomplete without you, but in the way that means your presence, your specific gifts, your specific willingness to show up, matters to something larger than you have allowed yourself to believe. Jesus says, there is work only you can do, precisely because it was shaped around your specific life, your specific wounds turned into wisdom, your specific way of loving people that no one else can fully replicate. That work is waiting, and it needs you exactly as you are, not as some polished, finished version you keep waiting to become before you feel ready. You have believed, for longer than you'd like to admit, that you need to have everything figured out before you're truly useful. That belief has kept you waiting on the sidelines of your own life, watching, hesitating, telling yourself that once you heal a little more, learn a little more, become a little more confident, then you will finally step forward. That day of complete readiness was never actually coming. It doesn't work that way. God says, I need you now, in your current state, unfinished and still healing, because that is exactly the condition every person is in when they are actually called to something meaningful. Readiness is not a prerequisite for being needed. It is often the result of finally showing up despite not feeling ready. Think about the specific thing you have been holding back from, telling yourself you'll do it once you feel more capable, more confident, more prepared. Consider that the waiting itself may be exactly what is standing between you and something significant that has been waiting on your willingness to begin. Jesus says, I called ordinary, unprepared, uncertain people throughout my life, not because they were the most qualified candidates available, but because their willingness mattered more than their qualifications. That same principle applies to you today. Your willingness matters more than your sense of readiness. You have carried loneliness that you have not fully named to anyone, a sense of being unseen even in rooms full of people who supposedly know you well. That loneliness is not a sign that you are unlovable or forgettable. It is often a sign that you have been protecting yourself, keeping your true self hidden out of fear that it wouldn't be welcomed if it were fully seen. God says, I see the true self you have been protecting, and it is not something to hide. It is needed, precisely as it is, by people who have not yet met the fully visible version of you. Consider what it would mean to let that version be seen a little more, starting today, with someone you already trust. Think about the last time you felt truly, fully understood by another person, without having to explain or justify what you were feeling. If that memory feels distant, know that this kind of connection remains available to you, not because circumstances need to change dramatically first, but because you are capable of offering and receiving it now, starting with a small, honest step. Jesus says, I need you to stop waiting for someone else to go first in offering honesty, vulnerability, and genuine connection. Consider being the one who goes first today, even in a small way, with someone who might be waiting for exactly that kind of permission from you. You have carried guilt over things you cannot undo, decisions made with incomplete information, words spoken in anger or exhaustion that you wish you could take back. That guilt has followed you longer than it needed to, because you have not yet fully accepted the forgiveness that was offered the moment you were genuinely sorry. God says, I am not asking you to forget what happened or to pretend it didn't matter. I am asking you to stop punishing yourself for something that has already been forgiven. Consider what it would mean to actually receive that forgiveness today, rather than continuing to carry a debt that was already settled long ago. Think about the specific guilt that has weighed on you most heavily, the one you replay most often in quiet moments. Consider speaking it honestly, even just to yourself, and then consider releasing it, deliberately, understanding that continued punishment serves no one, least of all you. Jesus says, I need you free from that guilt, not because your mistake didn't matter, but because carrying it indefinitely prevents you from fully engaging with everything that is still ahead of you. Release it today, as an act of trust rather than as evidence that the mistake never mattered. You have wondered, quietly, whether your life actually matters in any significant way, whether the ordinary shape of your days adds up to anything meaningful beyond simply getting through them. That question deserves an honest answer, not a dismissive one. God says, your life matters, specifically, not in a generic sense that applies equally to everyone, but in a particular sense shaped by your particular relationships, your particular gifts, your particular presence in the specific lives you touch daily, often without fully realizing the impact you are having. Think about someone whose day was genuinely better because of something you said or did recently, even something small you may have already forgotten. That impact was real, even if it went unacknowledged in the moment. Consider that this kind of impact happens more often than you realize, quietly, through ordinary interactions you may not have credited as significant. Jesus says, I need you to trust that your ordinary presence carries more weight than you currently believe. You do not need to do something extraordinary to matter. You simply need to keep showing up, honestly, consistently, in the ordinary moments that make up most of any life. If this message reached you today, believe that it arrived because you needed to hear it, and because you are needed for something specific, even if its full shape is not yet clear to you. Comment below if you feel this need being named clearly in your own life. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they matter today, especially if they have been quietly doubting it. There is more still to say, because a need this real rarely fits into a message this short. God says, here is something further that needs to be said plainly. You have spent considerable energy trying to earn love, approval, or belonging, as though these things needed to be secured through constant effort rather than simply received as already available to you. That exhausting pattern has followed you into many relationships, many settings, many quiet moments of self-assessment where you measured your worth against how much you had accomplished or given. Consider what it would mean to stop earning and start simply receiving, at least in the relationships where genuine love has already been freely offered to you, regardless of what you have or haven't accomplished recently. That shift, difficult as it may feel initially, tends to relieve a weight that has been quietly present for longer than you have consciously recognized. Jesus says, I need you rested, not constantly striving to prove your worth through relentless effort. Rest does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means releasing the belief that your value depends entirely on your output, replacing it with a more accurate understanding that your value was never actually in question to begin with. Think about a specific relationship or situation where you have been striving hardest to prove your worth, exhausting yourself in the process. Consider what it would look like to simply show up honestly in that relationship or situation, without the added weight of needing to prove anything beyond your genuine presence and effort. God says, here is a further truth. You have likely underestimated how much your presence alone, without any additional achievement attached to it, has already meant to people who love you. Consider the people who simply want you present, engaged, and honest, rather than impressive or accomplished. Their love for you was never actually conditional on your achievements, even if fear has sometimes convinced you otherwise. Consider a specific person who loves you unconditionally, and consider what it would mean to fully trust that unconditional nature rather than continuing to act as though their love required ongoing proof of your worth. Trust that today, deliberately, in how you show up with them. Jesus says, here is something that needs saying about your relationship with difficulty itself. You have faced considerable hardship, more than you often acknowledge even to yourself, and you have survived every bit of it so far. That survival is not incidental. It reflects a genuine strength that you may have grown so accustomed to using that you no longer fully recognize it as strength at all. Consider what you have survived that would have genuinely broken someone with less resilience than you actually possess. Name it honestly, without minimizing it the way you may have grown accustomed to doing out of humility or simple habit. That survival deserves recognition, from yourself, today. God says, I need you to recognize your own strength clearly, not out of pride, but out of accuracy. Underestimating your own resilience makes you more hesitant to face future difficulty than you actually need to be, given everything you have already proven yourself capable of enduring. Think about what you would tell someone else who had survived exactly what you have survived, if they came to you doubting their own strength the way you sometimes doubt yours. You would likely remind them clearly of their resilience, their capability, their proven track record of making it through difficult things. Offer yourself that same clear reminder today. Jesus says, here is a further layer of what I need from you. I need you to extend the same compassion to others that you have needed extended to yourself during your hardest moments. You know, more intimately than most, what it feels like to be struggling quietly while appearing fine on the surface. Use that knowledge to extend patience toward others who may be doing the same thing right now, without your full awareness of what they're actually carrying. Consider someone in your life right now whose behavior has been difficult to understand or tolerate lately. Consider that they may be carrying something significant that they have not shared with you, the same way you have often carried significant struggles without fully sharing them with the people around you. Extend the grace you have needed to them today. God says, here is something about your specific gifts, the ones you have perhaps dismissed as too ordinary to matter significantly. Consider what you do easily, almost without noticing, that other people around you consistently struggle with or admire in you. That ease is not evidence of insignificance. It is often evidence of exactly where your specific contribution is meant to be offered most fully. Think about a specific skill or quality that comes naturally to you, one you may have taken for granted precisely because it feels unremarkable from the inside. Consider what it would mean to offer that skill or quality more deliberately and more confidently going forward, rather than continuing to undervalue it simply because it doesn't feel difficult or impressive to you personally. Jesus says, I need that specific gift, offered fully rather than minimized or hidden. It was given to you for a reason, and that reason is connected to people who genuinely need exactly what you have to offer, even if you have not yet fully recognized who they are or how your gift will eventually reach them. If this message reached you today, believe that everything shared here was true, meant specifically to remind you of your own worth, your own strength, and your own necessary place in a larger story still unfolding. Comment below if you feel this message speaking directly to something you have been quietly doubting about yourself. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they are needed, exactly as they currently are. There is a deeper layer to this message still waiting to be shared, one that speaks directly to the fear underneath much of what has already been discussed. God says, you have been afraid, for a long time, that if people truly knew everything about you, the full weight of your doubts, your failures, your ordinary human struggles, they would love you less rather than more. That fear has shaped how much of yourself you allow others to actually see, keeping significant parts hidden even from people who claim to know you well. Consider what it would mean to test that fear directly, with one person you trust enough to risk it, sharing something you have kept hidden out of fear it would change how they see you. Often, this kind of honesty deepens connection rather than damaging it, precisely because it removes the exhausting performance that has quietly been standing between you and genuine intimacy. Jesus says, "I already know everything you have been hiding, every doubt, every failure, every moment you are least proud of, and none of it has changed how deeply you are loved." That love has never been contingent on your ability to hide the difficult parts of yourself convincingly. Consider extending that same unconditional acceptance toward yourself, starting today. Think about the specific part of yourself you have worked hardest to keep hidden from others, the one you fear would be judged most harshly if it were ever fully seen. Consider what evidence actually exists that this fear is accurate, versus evidence that suggests people who genuinely love you would respond with more compassion than you currently expect. God says, here is something further about the isolation that fear has produced in your life. Isolation feels protective in the moment, keeping you safe from potential rejection, but it also prevents the very connection you have been quietly longing for. Consider what small step toward reduced isolation would look like for you today, understanding that the safety isolation provides is often more illusion than genuine protection. Consider reaching out to someone today, not with a polished, edited version of how you're doing, but with something closer to the actual truth of your current experience. This honesty, even offered in small doses, tends to build the kind of connection that isolation, however protective it feels, has never actually been able to provide. Jesus says, "I need you connected, not isolated, because connection is where much of the meaningful work you are called to actually happens." Isolation, however understandable given past hurt, limits your capacity to both give and receive the support that is genuinely available to you, if you are willing to risk the vulnerability connection requires. Here is a further layer, concerning what you believe about your own future. You have likely absorbed, at some point, a belief that good things happen more easily and more reliably for other people than they do for you, a quiet sense that you are somehow destined for more struggle than most people around you seem to experience. That belief, however deeply held, is not an accurate prediction of what remains possible for you. God says, consider where that belief originated, tracing it back honestly to whatever specific experiences first planted it in your thinking. Often, beliefs like this trace back to a handful of painful experiences that got generalized into a permanent conclusion about your life's overall trajectory, rather than remaining limited to the specific circumstances that first produced them. Think about evidence in your own life that contradicts this belief, moments of genuine goodness or unexpected blessing that arrived despite your quiet expectation that such things were reserved for other people. Consider weighing that evidence fairly, rather than letting a more painful narrative continue to dominate your overall expectations for what remains possible. Jesus says, "I need you to release this belief, deliberately, today, replacing it with a more accurate understanding that good things are available to you just as genuinely as they are available to anyone else, regardless of how consistently past experience may have suggested otherwise." Here is a final layer before this message moves toward its close. You have carried a specific hope for a long time, one that has felt increasingly foolish to keep holding on to given how long it has remained unfulfilled. Consider that this specific hope may be closer to fulfillment than you currently believe, precisely because you have continued holding on to it despite every reason circumstance has given you to release it. God says that persistence itself is significant, evidence of a faith that has remained intact through genuine difficulty rather than requiring easy confirmation to survive. Consider what it would mean to hold that hope a little longer, trusting that persistence like yours is rarely asked to continue indefinitely without eventual fulfillment. Think about the specific hope you have been carrying longest, the one that feels most vulnerable to admit even to yourself at this point. Consider speaking it plainly today, whether in prayer, in conversation with someone you trust, or simply in your own private reflection, rather than continuing to minimize or dismiss it out of fear of further disappointment. Jesus says, I need you to keep hoping, even when hope feels difficult to sustain, because hope sustained through difficulty tends to produce a different, deeper kind of fulfillment than hope that arrived easily and without genuine testing. Trust that your specific hope has not been forgotten, even during the seasons it has felt most distant. If this message reached you today, believe that it arrived carrying everything you needed, both the reminder of your own necessity and the encouragement to keep moving forward despite fear, isolation, and doubt. Comment below if you feel ready to release one specific fear or doubt named in this message today. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they are needed, connected, and worthy of continued hope. Thank you for staying with this message until this point. There is a further layer to this message, one that speaks to what comes after today, once you have taken this reminder seriously and begun living differently because of it. God says, I need you consistent, not only inspired for a single day and then returning to old patterns once the feeling of this message has faded. Consider what specific practice would help you remember, regularly, everything shared here today, rather than allowing it to become simply a pleasant memory of one particular reading, disconnected from how you actually live afterward. Consider a brief daily practice, perhaps upon waking or before sleep, of reminding yourself specifically that you are needed, that your presence matters, that you are worthy of the love and connection you have sometimes doubted. This practice, repeated consistently, gradually reshapes deeply held beliefs far more effectively than a single powerful message experienced only once. Jesus says, transformation of belief happens gradually, through repetition and consistent practice, rather than through a single dramatic realization alone, however meaningful that realization felt in the moment. Consider committing to this kind of ongoing practice, understanding that today's message is meant to be a beginning, not a complete, one-time transfer. Matun. Here is something further about how you relate to your own mistakes going forward. Consider that you will continue making mistakes, inevitably, as every person does, and consider deciding, in advance, how you want to respond to those future mistakes differently than you may have responded to past ones. God says, I need you to respond to future mistakes with the same compassion you have been asked to extend toward your past ones throughout this message. Consider what specific language you want to use with yourself the next time you fall short of your own expectations, choosing that language deliberately now, before the moment of mistake actually arrives and old patterns of harsh self-criticism try to take over automatically. Think about a specific phrase or reminder you could use in that future moment, something brief enough to actually remember and apply in the middle of genuine difficulty or disappointment. Consider writing it down now, so that it is readily available when you actually need it, rather than trying to construct compassionate language for the first time in the middle of an already difficult moment. Jesus says, here is something further about relationships going forward, specifically about how you choose to show up in them differently, having been reminded today of your own inherent worth and necessity. Consider what it would mean to bring a little more of your true self into your existing relationships, gradually, rather than continuing the careful editing you have grown accustomed to. Consider one specific relationship where you could offer a bit more honesty, a bit more vulnerability, starting this week. Not a dramatic, overwhelming disclosure all at once, but a genuine, incremental step toward being more fully known by someone who has already shown themselves capable of loving you well. God says, I need you to trust that incremental honesty, practiced consistently over time, builds deeper connection more reliably than either complete concealment or overwhelming disclosure delivered all at once. Consider what small, honest step is available to you this week, and consider taking it deliberately. Here is a further consideration about how you spend your time and attention going forward, now that you have been reminded of your own significance and necessity. Consider what currently occupies significant time and energy in your life that does not actually align with the specific gifts and purpose named throughout this message. Jesus says, I need you to gradually reallocate your attention toward what actually matters, releasing what has simply become habitual distraction or obligation that no longer serves your genuine purpose. This reallocation rarely happens instantly. Consider one specific adjustment you could make this week, redirecting even a small amount of time towards something more aligned with what you have been reminded of today. Think about what currently consumes time you would rather redirect elsewhere, once fully honest with yourself about its actual value compared to what else you could be doing with that same time. Consider what specific reduction, even small, you could commit to this week, freeing up space for something more aligned with your genuine purpose and gifts. God says, here is a final practical consideration before this message continues toward its close. Consider who could hold you accountable to these specific commitments, someone who could check in with you periodically about whether you are actually living differently because of what this message reminded you of, rather than simply having read it once and moved on unchanged. Consider reaching out to that person today, sharing what specifically resonated most from this message and asking them to check in with you periodically about how you are applying it. This accountability, chosen deliberately, significantly increases the likelihood that today's reminder produces lasting change rather than a temporary feeling that fades within days. Jesus says, I need you supported in this ongoing process, not attempting it entirely alone through willpower that may waver once the initial inspiration of today has settled into the ordinary rhythm of daily life. Trust that seeking support is not weakness. It is simply wisdom, recognizing that lasting change tends to happen more reliably within community than in isolation. If this message reached you today, believe that it carried everything necessary, both the reminder of your worth and necessity and the practical structure for actually living differently because of it going forward. Comment below what specific commitment you are making this week because of this message. Share this with someone who needs both the reminder and the practical encouragement to actually follow through on it. Thank you for staying with this message until this point. There is one final layer to this message, and it may be the most important part to carry forward from everything shared today. God says, I need you to understand that being needed does not mean being burdened with responsibility for everyone and everything around you. There is a difference between genuine calling and compulsive overextension driven by fear of being seen as insufficient or unhelpful. Consider whether you have confused these two at any point in your life, taking on more than was actually yours to carry, out of a fear-driven need to prove your worth through constant giving. Consider what it would mean to distinguish clearly between what is genuinely yours to carry and what you have simply taken on out of guilt, obligation, or fear of disappointing someone. This distinction matters significantly for sustainable, long-term contribution, rather than the kind of burnout that eventually forces people to withdraw entirely from meaningful work they once cared about deeply. Jesus says, I need you sustainable, not depleted through overextension that eventually leaves you unable to contribute anything at all. Consider what boundaries would help ensure your continued capacity to show up for what genuinely matters, rather than exhausting yourself trying to be everything to everyone around you. Think about a specific responsibility you have taken on recently that was not actually yours to carry, one that has quietly depleted you without producing the sense of meaningful contribution you were hoping for. Consider what it would mean to release that specific responsibility, allowing it to be carried by someone else or simply released entirely, so that your remaining energy can be directed toward what is genuinely yours to offer. God says, here is something further about patience with your own process of change. Everything discussed in this message will not transform instantly, the moment you finish reading it. Change of this depth happens gradually, through consistent small choices repeated over weeks and months, rather than through a single moment of understanding, however meaningful that moment felt. Consider extending patience to yourself as you begin applying what this message has offered, understanding that setbacks and old patterns will likely resurface at points along the way. That resurfacing does not mean the message failed to reach you. It simply means change is happening the way change actually happens, imperfectly, with occasional returns to old patterns before new ones become fully established. Jesus says, "I need your patience with this process as much as I need your effort within it." Both matter. Effort without patience leads to discouragement when progress feels slow. Patience without effort leads to passive waiting without actual change. Consider holding both simultaneously as you move forward from today. Here is a final thought before this message closes completely. Consider what you would want someone else to know, if they were standing exactly where you stood when you first opened this message today, uncertain of their own worth, uncertain of their own necessity, quietly doubting whether their life actually mattered in any significant way. God says, you would likely tell them that they matter, specifically, not generically, that their particular gifts and their particular presence are needed by particular people in ways only they can fulfill. Offer yourself that exact same message now, understanding that it is just as true for you as it would be for anyone else standing at that same threshold of doubt. Jesus says, this is the final truth of today's message. You are needed. Not hypothetically, not conditionally, but genuinely, specifically, right now, exactly as you currently are. Carry that truth forward into the rest of your day, and let it shape how you show up in every ordinary moment still ahead of you. If this message reached you today, believe that it arrived precisely when you needed to hear it, carrying everything necessary to remind you of your own worth, your own necessity, and your own capacity to keep moving forward despite doubt, fear, and difficulty. Comment below if this message reminded you of something you had quietly forgotten about your own significance. Share this with someone who needs to hear, today, that they are genuinely needed. Thank you, sincerely, for staying with this message until its true final word. You are needed, my child. Not someday. Today. Exactly as you are. Before you close this message, take one final moment. Place your hand over your heart, feel it beating steadily, and let yourself actually receive what has been said here today, rather than simply processing it intellectually and moving on unchanged. God says, say quietly to yourself, I am needed. Say it even if part of you resists believing it fully. Say it especially if that resistance is strong, because that resistance is exactly what this message was written to gently address. Jesus says, this truth does not depend on your full belief in it to remain true. You are needed whether or not you currently feel it fully. But belief, cultivated gradually through practices like this one, tends to deepen your capacity to actually live from this truth rather than simply knowing it abstractly. Consider what it would mean to carry this truth into a specific interaction later today, showing up a little more fully, a little more honestly, trusting that your presence in that interaction matters more than you might otherwise assume. God says, that interaction, whatever it turns out to be, is where today's message actually becomes real, rather than remaining simply an idea you read about once. Watch for that opportunity today, and when it arrives, show up as fully as you are able. If this message reached you today, believe it arrived exactly when you were ready to receive it. Thank you for staying with this message until its very last word, and for allowing it the chance to actually reach something real in you today. You are needed. That is the whole of today's message, said as clearly as it can be said. Carry it well. Archangel Michael says, one final thought before this message truly closes. Consider what it would look like to return to these words tomorrow, not out of obligation, but because the truth they carry is worth revisiting whenever doubt about your own worth or necessity resurfaces, as it likely will from time to time, the way old patterns of thought tend to do even after genuine progress has been made. Consider saving this message somewhere accessible, so that future you, facing a moment of doubt, can return easily to this exact reminder rather than having to reconstruct this same clarity from scratch during a moment when clarity feels hardest to access. God says, growth of this kind is rarely permanent after a single encounter. It requires this kind of ongoing return, this willingness to be reminded again and again, until the truth being offered gradually becomes something you no longer need reminding of quite as often, because it has become simply part of how you already understand yourself. Think about what specific doubt tends to resurface most often for you, the one most likely to make you question your own worth or necessity during difficult moments. Consider what specific line from this message would serve as the most useful counter to that particular doubt, and consider committing that line to memory, so it is available to you exactly when you need it most. Jesus says, I need you equipped with these reminders, ready to access them in moments of difficulty rather than only during calm, reflective moments like this one. Consider what practical step would help ensure that readiness, whether through memorization, written notes, or simply regular conversation with someone who can offer the reminder when you need it most. If this message reached you today, believe that everything shared here, including this final practical guidance, was meant to help this truth actually last beyond today, rather than fading the way many good insights unfortunately do without deliberate effort to sustain them. Thank you, truly, for staying with this message until its very final word. You are needed, today and every day after this one. Carry that truth forward, and let it steady you whenever doubt tries to convince you otherwise. Consider one final breath before you go, slow and deliberate, marking the true close of this message and the beginning of everything it has invited you toward today. God says, that is everything for now. Go gently, go confidently, and go knowing you are genuinely, specifically needed, exactly as you are. Jesus says, carry this with you into every ordinary moment still ahead of you today, letting it soften whatever has felt hard and strengthen whatever has felt uncertain. You are loved, you are needed, and you are never walking through any of it alone. Archangel Michael says, thank you for opening this message today, and for staying with it, fully, until its very last word. Few take the time to sit with something like this all the way through. That patience says something about how seriously you are taking your own worth and your own healing, and it will not go unrewarded. Consider what you will carry forward from today, specifically, into tomorrow and the days that follow. Not everything discussed here needs to be remembered in full detail. Simply carry the one truth that mattered most to you personally, and let it continue guiding you, quietly, steadily, in the days ahead. God says, this message is now truly complete. You are needed, you are loved, and you are ready for everything ahead of you. Jesus says, walk forward now, gently and confidently, carrying everything you needed from today into all the days still ahead of you. Consider sharing this exact message with someone whose worth may feel uncertain to them right now, someone who needs to hear, today, that they too are needed, exactly as they are, without condition or qualification. God says, that is truly the final word for today. Go in peace, go in confidence, and go knowing you were never facing any of this alone. Jesus says, one last reminder before you go. Whatever tomorrow brings, easy or difficult, carry with you the simple truth that you were needed today, and you will be needed tomorrow too, in ways both visible and quiet, ordinary and significant. God says, carry this truth gently, and let it steady you in every ordinary moment still ahead. Archangel Michael says, go now, needed and loved, into everything this day still holds for you. Jesus says, this truly is the last word for today. You are needed. Go now, in peace.